Marcus pushed open the glass door of the luxury shop with slow, careful steps, trying not to draw attention to himself, but the soft chime above the entrance still made everyone turn their heads for a moment, and in that single moment, he felt every pair of eyes scan him from head to toe, judging him before he even took his second step inside, because he was wearing simple, old clothes, the kind you wear when you work long hours and save every coin, and he held a worn-out wallet in his hand. The kind that shows years of use, but Marcus didn't care about how he looked. He came with a purpose, he came with love in his heart, because tomorrow was his mother's birthday and he wanted to buy her something beautiful, something she deserved, something he had never been able to afford before. He took a deep breath and walked further inside, looking around at the shining shelves, the polished glass counters, and the soft golden lights that made everything look expensive and unreachable. And though he tried to keep his courage, he still felt small standing in a place built for people who wore suits, fancy shoes, and expensive perfumes. Yet he continued walking because he had promised himself that this year he was going to give his mother a gift she would remember forever. As he moved slowly from one display to another, he noticed the reactions around him. A couple near the perfume section stared at him with confused expressions, as if wondering what a man like him was doing in a place like this. A group of teenagers whispered while looking directly at him, trying to hide their laughter behind their hands, and a security guard near the back started following him with his eyes, shifting his weight like he was preparing for trouble, but Marcus pretended not to notice because if he reacted they would only see him as the problem and that wasn't why he was there. He reached a counter with women's watches and leaned in to get a closer look, admiring the delicate gold and silver designs, imagining how his mother's smile would look when she opened the gift box, imagining her surprised gasp, imagining her soft voice saying she didn't deserve something so nice, and imagining the warmth in her eyes that always made Marcus feel like everything he ever did was worth it, and just thinking about it made him forget the stares and whispers for a moment. But the moment didn't last long because as soon as he asked a staff member standing nearby, "Excuse me ma'am, can you show me this one?" She didn't even look him in the eye, she only glanced at his clothes, then at his wallet, and finally at the watch he pointed to, and without hiding her annoyance she replied in a cold tone, "Those are very expensive, sir," making sure her voice was loud enough for the others around to hear, and Marcus felt his cheeks burn from embarrassment, but he stayed polite, forcing a small smile and saying, "I know, I just want to look." The woman sighed like he was wasting her time, then slowly unlocked the display as if she were doing him a huge favor, and while she took out the watch, two customers who overheard her words exchanged amused looks and quietly laughed, their shoulders shaking slightly, and Marcus felt their laughter like a heavy weight pressing on his back. But still, he didn't show anger or frustration, he only watched the watch carefully, pretending he didn't hear them because he had learned in life that staying calm was sometimes the strongest thing a person could do. The longer he stood there, the more he noticed how everyone in the shop seemed to see him as a stranger who didn't belong, the kind of person they expected to walk out empty-handed or possibly be trouble. And even when he moved to the next section, he could feel their eyes following him, judging him silently, reminding him that he didn't fit into their perfect, polished world. But Marcus kept repeating to himself that he had worked hard for years, he had saved money little by little, and today was finally the day he could give his mother the gift she deserved, so he wasn't going to let anyone push him out just because of how he looked. He paused for a moment near a shelf filled with small jewelry boxes and touched one gently, feeling its smooth surface, imagining how his mother would open it with trembling hands, and he whispered to himself, "She deserves this," letting those words give him strength because even though his clothes were old and his wallet was worn, his intention was pure and his heart was full of love, and that was something no one in that shop could judge properly. Marcus stood tall again, straightened his shoulders, and took another step forward into the store, refusing to let the weight of discrimination break him. He didn't know what would happen next, he didn't know who else would laugh or whisper, but he did know one thing clearly, he was there for his mother, and for her he would walk through any room, face any stare, and carry any burden, because she had done the same for him his whole life. And so he continued deeper into the luxury shop, unaware that his silent courage was about to collide with a moment so powerful that it would change the whole store and shock every person watching him, including the ones who laughed at him when he first walked in. When Marcus moved farther into the luxury shop, the judging eyes only grew sharper, like invisible needles poking at his back, but he tried his best to ignore them, focusing instead on the shiny shelves and the soft glow of the gold displays, yet he couldn't escape the feeling that every step he took became entertainment for the people watching, as if he were walking across a stage he never asked for, and every whisper behind him felt louder than the store's gentle background music. A couple near the diamond bracelet section nudged each other and pointed at him as if he were some strange sight, and Marcus pretended not to notice, keeping his eyes fixed on the jewelry, but their soft snickering reached him anyway, making his chest tighten, the kind of tightness that comes from being judged without speaking a single word, and he wondered why kindness had become so rare that people laughed just because someone looked different from them. As he walked toward a small display case filled with elegant earrings, another worker stepped into his path with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes, and she said in a polite but dismissive voice, "Sir, the bargain items are near the entrance, perhaps that's what you're looking for." And Marcus paused, stunned by how quickly she assumed what he could or could not afford. But he simply thanked her and moved aside because arguing would only prove their assumptions wrong in a louder way, and he didn't want to create a scene. Still, the sting of her words stayed with him, and he found himself looking at the floor for a moment, trying to gather strength again, reminding himself why he came, reminding himself that he wasn't there to impress anyone, he was there for his mother, a woman who had worked double shifts at a diner for most of her life just to raise him, a woman who had given him everything she could even when she had nothing for herself, and he wanted to honor her with a gift worthy of her sacrifices. He took a deep breath and lifted his head again, walking toward a section with gift sets displayed inside glass cases, hoping he could browse without interruption. But as soon as he approached, he heard faint laughter from two young men standing near the entrance, and one of them said just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe he thinks this is a charity store." And the other laughed so hard he had to grab the counter for balance, and a few other customers smiled quietly, enjoying the moment, like it was a comedy show. Marcus kept walking, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted, but each laugh felt heavier than the last, and he wondered how a simple man trying to buy a gift had become a target for mockery. He wondered why people didn't see the human before they saw the clothes, and he wondered how many others faced this same kind of judgment every day without anyone ever telling their stories. He moved toward a shelf with delicate necklaces, and for a moment, the world grew softer again as he imagined how his mother might react to each piece, imagining her surprise, imagining her pride, imagining her joy, and that thought pulled him away from the negativity around him, reminding him that love was louder than laughter, and his purpose was stronger than their prejudice. But the shop didn't let him forget for long, because just as he reached for a necklace, a security guard walked up to him, stopping a few steps away, not saying anything but making his presence clear and intimidating, as if he were waiting for Marcus to make a mistake, and Marcus felt a chill in his spine, realizing the guard wasn't there for anyone else, just him, watching him closely like a problem waiting to happen. He tried to act normal, tried to stay calm, but knowing he was being monitored so closely made him uneasy, and he gently pulled his hand away from the necklace, not wanting to give the guard any excuse to question him. Then he took a step back, trying to breathe through the discomfort, and whispered inside his heart, "I just want to buy something for my mother, that's all," letting those quiet words steady him once more. Marcus looked around again, hoping to find a worker who would help without judgment, someone who might treat him like any other customer and not like an outsider, but all he saw was people who avoided meeting his eyes, people who pretended to be busy, or people who simply didn't want to assist a man who didn't look wealthy enough for their store, and that silent rejection felt almost heavier than the open laughter. Even so, Marcus didn't walk out, because leaving now would mean letting them win, letting their prejudice push him away from a place where he had every right to be, and he had promised himself long ago that he wouldn't let the world decide where he did or didn't belong. So he stayed, standing strong even though he felt alone in a room full of people. He moved quietly to another section, determined to keep searching, unaware that the cruel whispers and unfair assumptions were building toward a moment no one expected, a moment that would soon shift the entire store's energy, turn every judging eye wide with shock, and reveal a truth none of them could have imagined about the quiet man they had laughed at the moment he walked in. Marcus moved deeper into the luxury shop, hoping his experience would finally improve, but the moment he stepped toward the central display, he felt a sharp wave of disrespect wash over him again, and this time, it came with a force that made his heart sink just a little more, because a new salesperson stepped forward with a stiff posture and a smile so fake it was almost painful to look at, and she said in a voice that sounded polite on the surface but carried clear insult underneath, "Sir, these items are for serious buyers only," as if the simple sight of him proved he wasn't one of them. Marcus stopped, his hand hovering over a jewelry piece he wanted to examine, and he looked up at the woman with calm eyes, even though inside he felt a small crack forming, the kind of crack that comes from being judged again and again, and with a gentle voice he replied, "I am a serious buyer," hoping his words would be enough to be treated like any other customer, but the salesperson didn't soften, didn't apologize, didn't even blink. She simply folded her arms and replied, "You can browse the lower price section instead," then pointed casually to the far corner of the store like she was guiding a lost child. He felt the humiliation sting through him, but he forced himself to stay calm, reminding himself why he came, because his purpose his mother's happiness, was worth more than his pride, and he didn't want to walk away without trying again, so he asked politely if he could see a particular necklace. But the woman simply looked him up and down and said, "I don't think this is in your range," and her voice dripped with certainty, as if she knew every detail of his bank account just by looking at his. Two women standing nearby giggled softly when they heard her comment, covering their mouths but letting their eyes stay on him, watching him like he was part of some joke they couldn't wait to retell later, and Marcus felt the heat rising in his face, not from anger but from shame. A shame he didn't earn, a shame placed on him by others who thought appearance was the same as worth. The salesperson didn't stop there. She continued talking loudly enough for others to hear, saying, "Please don't touch anything unless you plan to purchase it," and her tone suggested she expected him to break something or sneak something away, and Marcus stood there silently, swallowing the heavy lump in his throat because he didn't want to say something that would turn the moment into a scene, but inside he felt tired of being judged at every step, tired of proving himself in places where others walked freely with respect handed to them without question. He stepped away slowly, giving the salesperson space because he knew she didn't want him near her expensive section, and he wondered how many people like him had walked into places like this and walked out with their heads lowered, not because they did anything wrong but because someone else decided they weren't worthy of kindness, and the thought made his chest tighten again. Still, he kept walking because he had always taught himself that dignity was something you carry inside, not something the world gives you, and as long as he carried it, no one could take it from him, but the shop made it difficult, especially when a group of young customers nearby burst into laughter the moment he walked by, and one of them joked, "Maybe he's looking for the exit," and the others laughed even louder, the sound echoing through the store like cruel music. Marcus didn't stop or react, he just kept walking, but every laugh chipped away at his spirit, every insult weighed on his shoulders, and the loneliness inside the crowded store felt worse than standing alone on a street at night, because loneliness created by other people's cruelty has a special kind of heaviness, a heaviness that makes the world feel colder. He walked toward a smaller display near the back where he hoped to look around quietly, but even there, a staff member followed him closely, pretending to organize the shelves, but really watching his every movement like he was a threat, and Marcus felt the same silent accusation over and over without a single word spoken. "You do not belong here." He rested his hand briefly on the counter to steady himself, taking a deep breath, trying to pull his focus back to his mother's smile, but the weight of humiliation made it hard to breathe normally, because while he could ignore whispers and stares, the open disrespect was harder to swallow, harder to rise above, especially when all he wanted was something simple, respect and a chance to buy a gift like any other person. Even so, Marcus did not leave because he knew if he walked out now, he would be leaving with pain instead of purpose, and he reminded himself once again that he wasn't there for them, he wasn't there for the workers or the customers, he was there for his mother, and for her he could stand through anything, so he stayed, standing tall even though the world around him tried to push him down. But in the middle of all that disrespect, something unusual happened, something small but strange, a sudden shift in the store's energy, a quiet hush from the staff area, a subtle movement among the workers, like they were preparing for someone important, and Marcus didn't know it yet, but the moment that would change everything, the moment that would turn whispers into silence and arrogance into regret, was getting closer with every passing second, and soon the entire shop would look at him very differently, not because he changed but because the truth about him was finally about to come into the light. Marcus moved toward the center of the store again, hoping the atmosphere might soften, but instead the humiliation only grew sharper, like a cold wind cutting through his jacket, because as he reached for a delicate bracelet, a loud voice rose from behind him, clear enough for half the store to hear, "Hey, don't touch that unless you can afford it." And the words hit him like a slap, making him freeze mid-movement. A middle-aged customer wearing an expensive suit stood there with a smug expression, arms crossed tightly, as if he were the unofficial guardian of the entire shop, and he smirked at Marcus like he knew everything about him. His income, his worth, his place in the world, without even exchanging a simple greeting, and the people around them turned to watch, their curiosity lighting up like sparks ready to ignite a fire of mockery. Marcus swallowed slowly, wanting to respond politely, but before he could say a word, the suited man laughed and added, "Don't worry, kid, they don't give discounts for dreams," and the nearby customers burst into laughter, their faces full of amusement, their eyes full of judgment, and Marcus felt the heat of humiliation rising from his chest to his cheeks, because the laughter wasn't just noise, it was a reminder of how the world still saw him. He lowered his hand, stepped back, and tried to keep breathing normally, but everything inside him felt tight like the walls were closing in, and he wished for just one moment of peace inside a store that was supposed to make people feel special, not small, but today it felt like the opposite because the more he tried to blend in, the more they pushed him out with their eyes, their comments, and their cruel assumptions. A young girl working at the counter watched the scene from a few steps away, and instead of stepping in to help Marcus, she whispered something to another worker and laughed, like it was all entertainment, all a show put on for their amusement, and Marcus felt something inside him crack a little deeper, not because he believed their cruel words, but because he realized how quickly people judge what they do not understand. He walked away quietly, wanting to find a corner where no one would bother him, but the staff seemed determined to keep an eye on him, and one of them even walked behind him at a slow pace, pretending to arrange the displays but watching him like a hawk, and Marcus felt the pressure rising, the silent accusation that he didn't belong, that he was suspicious, that he was less than the others who walked around freely. He stopped near a display of perfume bottles, hoping to escape the attention for a moment, but the humiliation was far from over, because the same man in the suit walked past him again and whispered loudly to a woman beside him, "Maybe he's just here to smell the air conditioning." And the woman laughed so hard she covered her mouth, and several others turned to look at Marcus, their smiles sharp like broken glass. Marcus clenched his jaw gently, not in anger but in the effort to remain calm, because he remembered how his mother always told him, "The world may look at you wrongly but you must look at yourself the right way," and he held on to those words like a lifeline, letting them steady him when the world tried to shake him. Still, the shame felt heavy like a weight tied around his chest, and he wondered if he should leave before things got worse, before someone accused him of something he didn't do, before the embarrassment became unbearable. But then he saw a soft blue necklace inside the glass case near him, and he immediately pictured his mother wearing it, smiling, her eyes filling with joy, and that image gave him courage again, pushing the humiliation to the back of his mind. He leaned closer to look at the necklace carefully, and for the first time since entering the store, he felt a brief moment of calm, until the store manager arrived, walking briskly with a strict face and heavy steps, and she stopped directly in front of Marcus, blocking his view of the necklace entirely, and without greeting him, without asking a question, she said sharply, "Sir, if you're not buying anything, I must ask you to leave." Her voice was loud enough that the customers nearby all turned to watch, eager for more drama, eager to see how Marcus would react, like he was no longer a human being but a character in a spectacle created for their entertainment, and Marcus stood there, stunned and speechless, because this wasn't misunderstanding anymore. This was pure, open humiliation. He tried to explain softly, "I'm here to buy a gift for my mother," but the manager cut him off with a dismissive wave of her hand, saying, "We can't have people wandering around without purpose. Please don't disturb other customers." And the insult struck him like a punch, sharp and undeserved, because he wasn't disturbing anyone. He was the one being disturbed, judged, and pushed aside repeatedly. Marcus lowered his gaze, feeling a mix of sadness and exhaustion, because he didn't understand why kindness cost so much in places like this, and why some people thought respect was something only the wealthy deserved. Yet even in that moment of deep hurt, he didn't lash out, he didn't raise his voice, he didn't let anger poison him, he simply stood there with grace, something the manager herself lacked. But while everyone stared at Marcus, expecting him to walk out quietly with his head down, something unexpected began to shift behind them. A soft murmur among the staff, an anxious shuffle of feet, and the sudden straightening of their postures, because someone very important had just entered through the private door in the back. Someone whose presence made the workers nervous, someone whose arrival was about to turn the entire store upside down, leaving every mocker speechless and every judgment shattered. And Marcus had no idea that his moment of humiliation was seconds away from becoming the moment that would shock everyone watching him. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his breath caught in his chest after the manager's harsh words, but before he could gather himself enough to step away, the atmosphere in the store shifted again. This time more sharply, more noticeably, like a sudden wave of tension moving through the air. And he realized something unusual was happening when the staff members who had been laughing and whispering just moments ago suddenly straightened their backs and adjusted their clothes as if someone important had stepped into the room. The security guard who had been following Marcus took 2 quick steps back and fixed his posture. The saleswoman who mocked him earlier instantly closed her gossip-filled mouth, and even the man in the expensive suit lowered his smirk slightly, glancing around as though he sensed authority nearby. And Marcus, confused, simply watched them, unsure of what caused this sudden change in behavior. Then, from the far end of the store, a tall man in a black tailored suit walked out of a private door with quiet confidence, the kind of confidence that didn't need to be announced, because every worker recognized him instantly, and their faces shifted from arrogance to fear, from relaxed to alert, from careless to perfectly professional, and Marcus could feel the tension stretch even tighter as the man stepped further into the bright lights of the showroom. It was the CEO, though Marcus didn't know that yet, and he walked with calm authority, scanning the store not with pride, but with expectation, as though he had come to check on something important. And as his eyes traveled from one end of the shop to the other, they eventually landed on the scene unfolding near the perfume display. Marcus standing quietly with his head slightly lowered, a manager staring at him with irritation, and several customers watching the moment like an ongoing show. The manager, noticing the CEO, quickly stepped away from Marcus and fixed her blazer, forcing a polite smile on her face. Then she hurried toward the CEO, ready to greet him with exaggerated respect. But the CEO didn't look at her, not even for a second, because his eyes remained locked on Marcus. Focused, sharp, almost startled, and this startled expression wasn't anger or confusion, but something deeper, familiarity. The CEO walked right past the manager, ignoring her completely, and she froze mid-step, shocked and embarrassed, and the entire staff exchanged confused glances because they had never seen him overlook a manager like that. But the CEO kept moving, his attention fixed on Marcus as if the world around them didn't exist at all. Marcus looked up slowly, unsure why the tall man was approaching him so directly, and the customers leaned in slightly, sensing something unusual, something unexpected, something that didn't match the story they had created about Marcus in their minds. And the man in the expensive suit paused mid-step, his smirk fading completely as he realized the CEO wasn't walking toward him but toward the man everyone had mocked. When the CEO finally reached Marcus, he stopped right in front of him and exhaled deeply, his expression softening in a way that stunned every worker within sight. Then he spoke in a respectful tone that carried through the entire store. "Sir, I didn't know you were visiting today," and the moment those words left his lips, the entire shop fell silent. Customers blinked in disbelief, workers stiffened like statues, and the manager's forced smile collapsed into pure panic, because the CEO's tone wasn't casual, wasn't polite, wasn't the kind he used for ordinary customers. He spoke to Marcus with genuine respect, with familiarity, with a tone reserved for someone important, someone valued, someone who mattered. Marcus, equally stunned, cleared his throat gently and replied quietly, I'm just here to buy a gift." And his humble voice contrasted so sharply with the CEO's tone of respect that several people looked away, suddenly ashamed of the way they had treated him. The CEO's expression grew even softer, and he stepped slightly closer before saying, "Anything you want, we will arrange it immediately," and his voice carried a warmth that none of the store's workers had shown Marcus even once. The manager rushed forward nervously, trying to insert herself into the moment, stuttering, Sir, I was just assisting." But the CEO raised his hand lightly, stopping her mid-sentence, and she went silent instantly, her cheeks flushing with fear because she knew she had made a mistake she couldn't undo. The CEO turned back to Marcus and continued in a calm, respectful tone. "If you need help, I will personally assist you." And the shock across the store deepened because no one had ever seen the CEO offer such personal help to any customer before. The man in the expensive suit slowly lowered his gaze, realizing how horribly wrong he had been, and the customers who laughed earlier shifted uncomfortably, wishing they could disappear from the room, because in one unexpected moment, the man they mocked had become the man the CEO honored. Marcus stood there silently, still trying to understand what was happening, unaware that the moment was far from over, unaware that the truth behind the CEO's respect, and the truth behind who he really was about to unfold in a way that would leave the entire store stunned, humbled, and speechless, forever remembering the day they judged the wrong man. A heavy silence covered the entire store after the CEO spoke to Marcus with so much respect, and for a long moment, no one dared to move, as if the air itself had become still, watching the two men face each other. But while everyone else froze from shock, Marcus felt something entirely different. Confusion, because he couldn't understand why a powerful CEO was speaking to him like he was someone important, someone familiar, someone special. The CEO's calm voice broke the silence again when he said, "Let me take care of everything for you, sir." And he gently placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture that made half the staff gasp quietly, because they had never seen him touch a customer with such warm familiarity, and certainly not someone they had spent the last hour humiliating. Marcus blinked slowly, unsure of what to say, and finally managed, You know me?" His voice soft, honest, almost shy, and the CEO smiled with a warmth that carried years of unspoken gratitude, then nodded slowly, "Of course, sir. I remember everything," and his tone held something personal, something meaningful, something no one else in the store understood yet. The manager, pale with embarrassment, stepped closer and tried to speak again. "Sir, I didn't realize," but the CEO didn't even turn his head, he simply lifted his hand in a gentle but firm motion that silenced her completely, and she stepped back like she had touched something burning, because she knew there was no excuse strong enough to erase the disrespect she had shown. The security guard, who had followed Marcus everywhere earlier, now stood stiff like a soldier caught misbehaving, and he lowered his eyes, ashamed, knowing he had watched Marcus not for protection but for suspicion, and every customer who had laughed earlier felt the weight of regret sink into their stomachs. The man in the expensive suit who had mocked Marcus loudly, slowly stepped backward, trying to blend into the crowd, hoping no one remembered his words, but his shame was written all over his face and Marcus saw it, but he didn't glare or seek revenge, because he wasn't the kind of man who fought cruelty with cruelty, he simply stood with quiet dignity, something those people didn't recognize until it was too late. The CEO turned to one of the employees and said firmly, "Bring me the sapphire necklace from the vault," and the worker nodded so quickly it looked like his neck hurt, because no one dared hesitate when the CEO spoke, but the command confused the customers even more. Why would the CEO offer something from the vault for a man they had judged as poor? As the worker hurried away, the CEO took a small breath and looked at Marcus again, his voice softer this time, almost emotional. "Sir, you once helped me, years ago," he said quietly, and Marcus's eyebrows lifted in surprise, because he couldn't remember helping a man like him, not someone dressed in wealth and power. The CEO continued, his eyes gentle. "You probably don't recognize me," he said with a small smile, "but when I was young, struggling, lost in my life, you did something I never forgot." And the shop grew even quieter because now everyone was listening, trying to piece together the connection between the humble man and the powerful CEO. Marcus stared at him, searching his memory, but the CEO helped him, saying softly, "You used to work at the old community center. You helped young people like me, you listened, you encouraged, you told us we mattered." And slowly, like a faint light turning brighter, Marcus remembered a teenager with sad eyes who often stayed after hours just to talk. "Yes," Marcus whispered, "you were that boy," and the CEO nodded, emotion flickering across his face. "You told me to never give up, you told me my life could change," and his voice cracked for a moment, surprising everyone. "You believed in me when no one else did." The customers who mocked Marcus earlier stared at the floor now, unable to look at him, because the man they laughed at had once helped shape the life of the CEO they admired, a man they respected, a man they feared. The worker returned with a velvet box, opening it carefully to reveal a stunning sapphire necklace, shimmering under the lights like a small piece of the sky, and the CEO took it gently and placed it in Marcus's hands, saying, "For your mother, as a thank you for everything you once did for me." Marcus's eyes filled with emotion, his heart heavy and warm at the same time, and he whispered, "I didn't do anything special," but the CEO shook his head firmly. "You did everything," he replied. "This entire company exists because someone like you believed in someone like me." And for the first time since entering the store, Marcus felt something other than judgment. He felt seen, valued, respected, and the store that once made him feel small now felt like a place where the truth had finally surfaced, shining brighter than any jewel behind the glass. And yet, the story was not over, because the CEO still had one more truth to reveal, one that would shake the entire shop even harder than his respect had, a truth about Marcus that no one expected, and that would leave every cruel whisperer speechless forever. The entire store stood frozen as the CEO placed the sapphire necklace in Marcus's hands, and for the first time since he'd walked in, Marcus felt warmth instead of judgment, but the weight of the moment, of gratitude, of unexpected respect, made his hands tremble slightly because he wasn't used to being treated with reverence, especially not in a place where people had laughed at him minutes ago. The CEO watched Marcus with a look of genuine appreciation, but behind that appreciation was something else, a quiet seriousness, a truth he was holding back, and finally, after a long breath, he said softly, "Sir, there is something I never told you," and the people around them leaned in instinctively, unable to stop themselves because the atmosphere was charged with mystery. Something big was coming, something none of them had imagined. Marcus lifted his eyes slowly, confused but patient, and he replied, "What is it?" His voice gentle, humble, the same voice he had used with everyone in the store, even the ones who mistreated him, and the CEO looked at him for a long moment before saying quietly, "You are not just the man who once encouraged me, you are more than that, much more." The staff exchanged puzzled glances, the customers frowned slightly, trying to guess what he meant, but the CEO continued before anyone could speak, "Sir, you are one of the silent investors of this brand," and his words dropped into the silence like a stone into still water, sending shockwaves through the entire store. For a second, no one breathed, no one blinked, no one moved. The revelation was too powerful, too unexpected, too impossible for their minds to accept immediately. Marcus blinked in disbelief, the words almost slipping past him. "Me, an investor?" he whispered, unable to process it, and the CEO nodded firmly, "Yes, sir. Years ago when we were starting out, we received an anonymous investment. It wasn't large by corporate standards, but it came at exactly the moment we needed it the most. That investment was from you." Marcus stumbled back a step, his heart shaking inside his chest, because he had sent money years ago to help a young entrepreneur from his community. He never tracked what happened next, never asked for credit, never wanted recognition. He just wanted to help someone who reminded him of the young people he used to guide, someone who deserved a chance. "I didn't know," Marcus whispered, still overwhelmed. "I just wanted to help you, help your idea." And the CEO smiled warmly. "And you did. That investment became the backbone of our very first store. That money built this company. Your belief built this brand." The manager's face turned pale as snow, her knees weakening as she realized the depth of her mistake, and the security guard swallowed hard, wishing he could turn invisible, while the customers who had mocked Marcus earlier stared at the floor, the shame so heavy it made their shoulders slump. The CEO continued, "You remained anonymous, sir. We never knew who you were until recently, when your old community center record surfaced during a charity review. When I saw your name, I couldn't believe it." An emotion flickered across his face, something raw, something grateful, something proud. Marcus's throat grew tight because he never wanted fame or recognition. He just wanted to help the younger generation find hope, the same way his mother helped him through life's storms, and now, standing in a place where he'd been looked down on only because of his clothes and skin, he felt the world turning upside down in the most unexpected way. The CEO turned toward the staff and customers, his voice no longer gentle but firm, powerful, commanding as he said, "This man is not only a valued investor but a man of integrity, kindness, and honor. The way he has been treated here today is unacceptable, and will not be tolerated in my company," and the employees lowered their faces, trembling because they knew consequences were coming. The CEO looked back at Marcus with a softer expression and added, "Sir, everything in this shop is yours to choose from today. Anything you want, for your mother or for yourself, is free of cost. It is the least we can do," and the words made some customers gasp quietly, their shame growing even deeper. But Marcus shook his head gently, humility shining in his eyes. "I don't need anything more. I only wanted a gift for my mother," and the CEO nodded, respecting the quiet strength in his voice, then said, "And she will receive the very best." The store, once filled with laughter and mockery, now felt like a place of quiet apology, where every person who misjudged Marcus silently wished they could turn back time. But Marcus didn't look at them with anger or pride. He looked at them with calm dignity, the same dignity they had failed to see earlier. Yet the CEO wasn't finished because he still had one more promise to make, one final gesture that would change Marcus's life forever, a gesture that would show what true gratitude looks like. And as he prepared to speak, the entire store braced for a moment even bigger than the last, a moment no one would ever forget. The entire store waited in silence, every face pale with shock as the CEO stood beside Marcus with a mixture of pride and deep respect in his eyes. And Marcus, holding the sapphire necklace meant for his mother, still struggled to understand how a simple visit to buy a gift had turned into a moment that flipped the entire room upside down. But the CEO wasn't finished, not even close, because he still had one last truth to reveal, a truth that would change Marcus's life forever. The CEO took a gentle breath and said softly, "Sir, there is something more I must tell you," and the room tensed again, every worker holding their breath, every customer inching closer, because they could feel something huge approaching. Something no one could have imagined when Marcus first walked through the door. Marcus looked at him calmly, though inside he felt the weight of the moment building like rising waves. "What more could there be?" he asked softly, genuinely curious, and the CEO smiled, not the polished smile he used for business meetings, but a real, heartfelt smile that held gratitude and admiration. He said in a voice that carried across the store, "This company, everything you see here, every success we have reached, none of it would exist without your kindness. So today I want to make something official," and he reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulling out a small black envelope, sleek and sealed. The manager widened her eyes, recognizing it instantly. The envelope reserved only for top-level partners, something employees rarely even saw, and the customers tensed as curiosity tightened the air like a drum about to be struck. The CEO handed the envelope to Marcus with steady hands and said, "I am offering you a full partnership in this company," and the words hit the room like a burst of light, powerful, unbelievable, blinding in its impact. Marcus stared at him, stunned beyond words, his fingers trembling slightly as they touched the envelope. "Partnership?" he whispered, his voice barely strong enough to hold the weight of the idea, because he had come into the store expecting nothing but a simple purchase, and now he was being offered something unimaginable. The CEO nodded gently, "Yes, sir. Your early investment saved us when we were one step away from collapse. I promised myself that if I ever found the person who believed in me during my hardest days, I would give them the place they deserved. You deserve this more than anyone, and the sincerity in his voice made several people in the store look away, ashamed of how they had judged Marcus earlier. The manager stepped back, trembling visibly, her arrogance melted into pure fear, because she knew what she had done. She had belittled, insulted, and tried to remove a man who now stood at the highest level of the company she worked for, and the weight of her mistake pressed on her chest like a stone she couldn't push away. The CEO continued speaking directly to Marcus. This partnership means you will have a voice in every decision, every project, every future store. You will be given your rightful place, not as a silent investor but as a leader, and his words filled the room with awe. Marcus felt emotion rising in his chest, warm and overwhelming because he had never asked for recognition, never wanted power, never chased status. He simply believed in helping others when he could, believing that kindness cycles back into the world eventually, and now that kindness was returning to him 1,000 times over. He took a slow breath, his eyes shining with gratitude, and finally said, "I don't know what to say," and the CEO placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, replying softly, "You don't need to say anything. You already earned this long ago." The customers who mocked him earlier now shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet his eyes, wishing the floor would open up and swallow them whole, while the employees stood still, silently learning the biggest lesson of their lives. Respect should never depend on appearance, clothing, or assumptions. Marcus turned to look at the necklace again, imagining his mother's soft smile when she would see it, imagining how she'd say she didn't deserve something so beautiful, and he smiled quietly, knowing that everything he had done for others had finally come full circle, lifting not only him but the woman who raised him through life's hardest storms. The CEO guided him toward the billing counter, not to charge him but to personally prepare the gift box, and every step Marcus took felt like walking through a new world, a world that finally saw him, valued him, respected him. As they reached the front of the store, the CEO paused, turned to the workers and said in a voice of authority, "Let today be a reminder. Never judge anyone by what you think you see, because greatness doesn't need to wear a suit to walk into a store." And his words echoed through the room like truth carved in stone. Marcus left the luxury store not as the man people laughed at, but as the man who silently helped build the very place that had tried to push him out. And as he stepped into the sunlight, holding the gift meant for his mother, his heart felt lighter than ever, his dignity untouched, his kindness rewarded, and his story forever remembered by everyone who witnessed the day the world misjudged the wrong man.